In the world of Persona, a select few individuals possess the power to break free from the chains that bind them and summon what is known as a persona. Even fewer have the ability known as the wild card, allowing them to wield multiple personas at once. Welcome to the Persona Compendium, where we're going to cover the history and symbolism of some of the franchise's most notable shadows, demons, and personas. Today, we're diving deep into the history behind a fan-favorite persona, Yusuke's Goemon. For those unfamiliar, Goemon is the first persona called by Yusuke Kitagawa, the Phantom Thief's fifth member. After a harrowing encounter with the shadow of his master, Ichiryusei Madarame, that reveals his nature as a fraud, Yusuke is overcome with emotion and pain and awakens to Goemon. This moment serves as the catalyst that sparks Yusuke's resolve and sets him on his journey to become a Phantom Thief. But the game tells us very little about Goemon, which begs the questions: who was Goemon, and why was he chosen to represent Yusuke? To answer this, we need to look all the way back at Japanese history and take a look at the tale of Ishikawa Goemon, who many refer to as the Japanese Robin Hood. Much like other main party members, Goemon is based on a historical figure turned folk hero. The real Ishikawa Goemon was a Japanese outlaw famous for stealing from the rich and giving the wealth to the oppressed and starving citizens. This reign of burglary and thievery was brought to a painful end when both Goemon and his son were sentenced to death after a failed assassination attempt on the warlord Toyotomi Hideyoshi, also known as the Second Great Unifier. To make matters worse, this execution was to be carried out with boiling water, meaning that Goemon was boiled alive in a large scalding cauldron. While there are very few historical accounts of Goemon, the ones that do exist mention his execution specifically. But this lack of strong documentation opens the floodgates for stories to propagate. Much like Captain Kidd, the legend of Goemon eventually became something much larger than reality. Rather fitting for the persona of an artist, but before we stray too far down that road, let's take a look at Goemon's design in Persona 5 and how it relates to Yusuke. At a glance, it's clear to see that Goemon has one of the boldest and most exaggerated designs in Persona 5. Everything about his outfit is extreme in every sense of the word, and this exaggeration makes perfect sense, but we can discuss that in a bit. Starting from the top, we see his Shimenawa belt reaching up past his head. For those curious, a Shimenawa belt is a kind of sacred rope commonly seen in Japanese shrines and other holy places. However, it's also seen as a clothing item worn by sumo wrestlers to denote rank. Goemon's Shimenawa is made of Yusuke's two primary colors, blue and white. Just beneath this, we see the exaggerated hair and makeup characteristic of characters depicted in ukiyo-e style. Further down is his traditional Japanese dress full of detailed and vibrant layers, all compounding into a brilliant work of art. And on this outermost layer, we see a large number 5 and the word Ichikawa. This is in reference to two things. The bold number 5 is meant to represent his status as the fifth member of the party. Pretty simple. The word, however, has a much more meaningful origin. The tale of Ishikawa Goemon has been recounted many times by many people, and one of the more famous accounts of this folk hero was done by Pedro de Morejon. In his version of the story, he refers to Ishikawa Goemon as Ichikawa Goemon. This particular account is famous for detailing his historic execution by scalding water. Moving all the way down, we finally get to those iconic shoes. Goemon proudly sports the traditional geita, with only one vertically mounted tooth. Pulling back a bit and looking at the full design, it's easy to see a strong influence from the ukiyo-e art style. Now, this art style was popular in Japan from the 17th to 19th centuries, but can still be found today in many places. This style is particularly relevant to Yusuke, as all of his art in-game is inspired by ukiyo-e, and as such, we see it reflected in many aspects of his character. But Goemon's design isn't the only part of this persona hiding callbacks to its historical counterpart. As we know, Goemon is mostly a physical persona, specializing in very strong physical skills like Vorpal Blade and Brave Blade. That said, he also specializes in ice magic. He can learn all Bufu skills up to Bufudyne, which may be a clever reference to the real Ishikawa Goemon. As we know, the famous tale of Goemon ends in tragedy with him being boiled alive due to a botched assassination attempt. Because of his tragic fate, many speculate that the specialization in ice and weakness to fire is actually a clever callback to this detail. While his extreme ability in physical attacks contributes to the legend of a master thief who fought off the guards of his victims. This specialization in physical skills also is rooted in the many exaggerated tall tales of Goemon's ability as a ninja. Many stories about him detail near impossible feats that no normal human could perform, and as such, his abilities have snowballed to become the ideal and almost supernatural ninja. So with such a great design and symbolic moveset, we're left with one critical question. Why was Goemon chosen to represent Yusuke in Persona 5? At the end of the day, only the developers will know every aspect of the answer to that question, but through the moves and the visual styling, it seems that they've left us some well thought out clues. First and most obviously, in history, Goemon was a figure commonly depicted in ukiyo-e art style, as his tale was beginning to pick up steam around the time that ukiyo-e was flourishing. This means that even though he wasn't alive during this time, his name and image are synonymous with this style of traditional Japanese artwork. And it's no coincidence that Yusuke famously draws and paints in this style. In fact, Yusuke Kitagawa is actually named after a famous artist from the period, Utamaro Kitagawa, who would frequently go by the name of Yusuke Kitagawa. As is clear to see, Yusuke's entire design is heavily steeped in the culture and history surrounding traditional Japanese art, complete with all of its eccentricities. His persona Goemon is not only a physical representation of his passion for art, but an expression of all the history, discipline, and passion that stands behind it. Examining the real-life accounts and exaggerated folk tales paints us the picture of a Japanese gentleman thief who worked not for himself, but for the good of the people. And because of that, Goemon not only feels right at home with Yusuke, but also with the Phantom Thieves as a whole. It's the smaller details such as this that go into making a character feel at place in a game or story. And while I may not have as much fun lore or concepts to look at like Cendrillon or Azathoth, Goemon feels like a perfect fit for Yusuke, and I wouldn't want him any other way. I think Goemon represents a refined persona for a user with refined taste, such as Yusuke Kitagawa. Hey, thanks for making it to the end of the video. If you made it this far, then you probably liked what I had to say. If that's the case, be sure to leave me a like so I know I'm doing something right. Also, be sure to leave me a comment down below on what themes, characters, and personas you guys want to hear me talk about next time. Also, be sure to hit that subscribe button so you never miss an upload. Best of all, it's free, and if you change your mind later, you can always unsub, no hard feelings. Finally, I also have a Twitter and an Instagram if those are your bag. Links to those will be below. But with all that YouTube stuff out of the way, I just want to say thanks for watching, and I hope to see you next time.